Welcome to the Saints Crown Show. This is a show for men who want to grow. In a world where confusion is the culture and passivity is the practice, we exist to take men from gaining massive clarity to taking massive action, because we believe that if we can help bring order to your life, you can bring order to your world.
Let's talk about marriage. We had two questions related to marriage that I'm very interested to hear your perspective on, because I'm not married yet. But one of them is, what are some characteristics of a couple doomed for divorce?
What are some characteristics of a couple absolutely doomed for divorce? I've worked with a lot of couples, and I work with my clients. I offer, if they're getting married, I'll do relational work with them or premarital. And there are a few common indicators. Doomed for divorce, number one, is they don't have alignment on what they believe. They believe different things. One person's a Muslim, another person's a Christian. One person's a Buddhist, another person's an atheist. One person's a capitalist, the other person's a communist. There's no alignment on what you actually believe about the world. Okay? So if their behaviors may be the same, they may like the same restaurants, all right? They both may love sex and making money, but if what they believe about the world is in contrast, that's going to bring some long-term misalignment and friction. So they believe different things. Number two would certainly be the area of finances. Like, I found that couples who are unwilling to join bank accounts end up having a higher rate of divorce.
Isn't that weird? I've heard so many more stories about that recently, of couples doing that. Like, they split bills and they split expenses and all of this stuff. And it's like these two separate things.
Ecosystems.
Like, your income goes there, my income goes here. You're paying for rent, I'm paying for a car. It's like, it's this out of alignment disunity, it almost feels like.
Yeah, it's almost like, you're your own person,
Like
sharing a house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not actually blended. So I've found friction, and I found that to be an indicator. If you're unwilling to join your bank account, and you also, if you have an exit strategy already in mind, like, should this relationship go south, like if someone's already storing or hiding money at the beginning of the relationship, if someone's already hiding their expenses or what they're buying, shoot, buddy, you've got a long road ahead. Like, every action, there's a reason behind every action. Yeah. And sometimes we're not even conscious of the reasons of why we do things. Are you all in with your finances? Because the scripture says, I believe, that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Yeah. So your treasure has to be full transparency in the relationship. It's got to be on the table. Like, this is not mine, but this is now ours, in order for this to work possibly. So that's another fishy subject. The other one would be a man who is actively looking at pornography. So we like to work through this before the relationship becomes a marriage, and make a confession point and a commitment to stopping if that happens. Sometimes there's a casual lifestyle of it, but there needs to be a ceasing of it before the actual marriage happens, and a confession of it. Because if you're a man and you're doing things sexually under the radar, well, there's also this belief and perception that now I'm going to have someone to have sex with, so that's going to go away. False. Not true. Right. So again, and that's the difference. Like, are you with her to love her, to give her love, or to take from her lust? So it's, you're going to find a way to get your desire for lust slaked. So where are you sexually? So if a man's looking at pornography, the likelihood of fracture is much higher, much higher. That would be an indicator. And then the fourth would be trust and transparency. Like, can you can you trust fully what the other person is saying? Like, do you believe every word that they say? And if you don't, you have to figure out why.
Yeah.
If there's any fracture of trust, the rest of the relationship begins to unravel.
Yeah.
Because if you feel like you have to check your spouse's location, there's a problem there. You may not even know what you're feeling or what's wrong, but just because you feel like you have to check, there's a problem. There's a trust problem, or trust that hasn't been built properly. Like, if you feel like as a woman, that a woman feels like she's unable to confront her husband about how maybe he was treating a waitress because it made her feel a certain way, and she's afraid of how he's going to react, there's a problem there. There's a line of communication that's broken. So trust is numero uno, buddy. Like, that's number one. So are there trust fractures, consciously or unconsciously? Can you believe every word that comes out of their mouth? If you can't, you've got some work to do. You got some things to sort out. But the beauty is, though, when you do have that trust built, it's like life becomes so free. Like, I believe, like my wife, I believe everything that she says. I don't have to question it or think about the deeper motive behind it, which is so freeing and beautiful.
Yeah.
Because most people, unfortunately, don't have that gift of ultimate trust and loyalty. And when you feel that, when you give that, you can do about anything together. You can overcome about any hardship. So I've found those to be the primary factors that doom you for a life of divorce, fractured finances, destroyed life, ripped apart friendships, which is, I think, we're at a pretty high rate now culturally, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because obviously divorce is very common in our culture. Do you believe that divorce is permissible?
I come from a biblical worldview, and there are, in the scripture, Jesus says, God ultimately hates divorce. So if God hates divorce, I want to hate what God hates as a Christian. So I do. I hate divorce.
Yeah.
But is divorce permissible? And what's said is, with the exception of really sexual immorality, really, or physical harm or danger or abuse. I think that has to be looked at from a critical perspective, and people need to be let in on that. But if your life is in danger, then you need to consider some extreme options. I think divorce would be a last resort. But there's a place where, if you come to a place where someone's completely seared of their conscience, they're unwilling to make any change. They're unwilling to receive help. You can't even trust any word that comes out of their mouth. Maybe they're abusive, cheating on you. What are you in? Like, what can you do? They're not even potentially pursuing relationship with God, the only one that can save them. What can you do? And I think that there's even a lot of women today that feel trapped in that place. So I would have to look to the scriptures.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you feel like divorce is so rampant in our society today?
I think we've had marriage redefined so much that we don't know what we're signing up for when we're doing it. We're signing, in a lot of people's minds, we're signing up for a wedding so that we can celebrate and then live together and have sex and build a life. But that's the surface of what marriage is. So when you have a standard for what marriage is, what marriage actually is, if you had the accurate standard, the rate would be so much lower, right? Culturally, it's a contract. We're together until one of us are unhappy or unwilling to live together anymore and make this work, or we're ready to move on. But biblically, I believe that marriage is a covenant.
Yes.
This is a blood covenant. Like, we're in this for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. Even and you watch, I'm involved in a lot of weddings, and people will give beautiful and sometimes fun vows. But now vows have become, to a degree, weddings, a show of how eloquent they can be. But when vows are supposed to be what you're actually vowing to bring to the table, like this is a serious, like covenantal matter.
Wow.
So when I'm working with my clients, if they're even going through that process, we work together on building extremely intentional vows that they're not just going to say one time and forget about, but they're going to look at, they're going to have posted somewhere that they're going to live by for the rest of their life. Like this is what I'm bringing to the table. Culturally, now, like we have a bridal party, and it's who are my friends that I want to hang out with for my bachelor and bachelorette party and bring and stand with me and hang out with. What was the original intent behind that? These are witnesses, and these are people that are deciding to stand with you because they come and stand at the front at the altar that are committed to making sure your marriage works. Like marriage used to be so much more of a communal experience. Like everyone there is all in on making sure that this marriage succeeds. And so unfortunately, our culture has deviated from that. But if you have a clear and accurate standard on what it is, then you have a chance of hitting it.
What would you say to the person? One of the questions we got asked was, how often should you have sex with your wife?
Every hour. Kidding. If possible. So what is like, how often should you not have sex with your wife? I'd say maybe if you were having sex, never. It's probably in the dead zone, in a bad zone. If you're having sex every 6 months, probably not too good. Maybe every 2 months, monthly, which is about the rate now.
Really?
Yeah, monthly is about the rate that a couple after about 4 to 5 years will lock into. Married for about 4 to 5 years. You're probably it's probably not the most optimal place to be in. And you can have all these reasons of like, why shouldn't I have sex? Right? It becomes inconvenient. Then we have our jobs, and then we're tired. Like it was fun and frivolous and random and spontaneous and romantic at the beginning, but now, like, I've been in the other room while you're pooping. Like I've slept next to you, and I've smelt your BO and your sweat, and I've seen you without your makeup. Like things have changed a little bit, so the spontaneity is not there. And then there's this expectation that it has to be spontaneous and combustion, this fire, which doesn't quite happen the way it used to be. And so if you have this expectation for a romantic, cinematic, sexual experience, well, you're going to be waiting for a long time, buddy, and then you're going to get bored and end up clicking onto Pornhub. I mean, that's kind of the pattern that things are taking right now. So then sex becomes neglected, and if it doesn't become a priority, then the couple begins to lose intimacy. And so I believe in life, you produce in the areas that you prioritize.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you saying? Should I have a plan for my sex life? The answer, I believe, is yes. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, even in sex. So what does it mean to, as a man, well, from a man's perspective, to ensure that you're giving love to your wife at least 2 to 3 times a week, 1 to 3 times a week? What would that look like? How can you make that happen? Well, my wife doesn't want me that much. I'm like, okay, well, like, are you being romantic to her? Are you coming behind her and kissing her neck? Are you lifting the burden off of her? Are you texting her sweet nothings throughout the day? Does she feel like every time you try to have sex with her, you're just using her, right? How have you conditioned your wife around it? Are you dating her? Are you dancing with her? How are you intentionally cultivating romance? And if none of that is existent, and again, we talked about the 4 human states: passive state, a weak state, a present state, and a peak state. Like if you're bringing your weak and passive state to the relationship, that's what you're producing.
Yeah.
Like you have the opportunity. Are you being present with her, and are you bringing her into a peak state?
Yeah.
Because in life, what do we remember? We don't remember many weak states. We don't remember passive state, but we remember peak moments where something special happened, where something outlandish happened that broke the patterns. Like, are you breaking her patterns? Are you pulling her out of the mundane in life? Are you rescuing her? And that's part of what romance is you're rescuing your woman, your wife, from a mundane life of being trapped in the castle. And sometimes you come in and slay the dragon, clean up the mess, play with the kids, put them to bed, and then sweep her off her feet and take her on a ride. I mean, are you practicing that? Are you sweeping her off her feet and finding a way to? Well, maybe she's negative and critical. Well, she's probably that because she wants closeness with you.
Yeah.
And so women in tension, when they feel like they need connection, they'll become negative and critical. When a woman is negative and critical, unfortunately, a man will become stoic and stonewall and withdraw. and then she'll feel like he's more distant, and she'll become more negative and critical because she feels insecure. Then he'll stonewall and become more stoic and shut down his emotions, and it becomes this cycle. So the question is, like, who's going to break the crazy cycle?
Yeah.
Might as well be you. Who's the leader? And that's how romance is cultivated. It must be prioritized because you produce in the areas where you prioritize.
That's so good. So what I'm hearing you say is it really comes down to never stopping the pursuit process. Like, I'm in the dating phase right now, and everyone keeps talking about pursuit. But I'm learning from my friends who are married, it's like that never stops. Like, you have to intentionally cultivate that. And so I love the phase of life that I'm in because I get to plan out dates and all of the fun things that go into that. But the reality is like, that's just beginning. Like, that never stops through the journey. And so one of the things I was thinking about when you were sharing that was, what are some factors or indicators that lead to a lack of sex or a lack of intimacy in your relationships?
Ultimately, if it's not cultivated, it won't be produced. So if your wife feels like she can't trust you, she will be more closed off. So how are you cultivating trust with her? Does she trust you? And so oftentimes it's not a sexual issue, it's a trust issue that needs to be sorted out. Because she doesn't want to open herself and be intimate with someone that she can't trust. And on the other end, what happens if it's at the end of the day and you don't feel like doing it? Well, oftentimes you maybe won't. Like, you don't. Sometimes you won't feel like doing it until you get going, right? But there are times that I don't feel like doing the things that I know I should do. Like, have there been times in your life where you didn't feel like going to the gym?
Yeah.
Have you ever regretted going to the gym?
No.
Same thing with sex. There'll be times where you don't necessarily feel like in the romantic, spontaneous, obsessive, passionate state. But at the end of it, I mean, if you're going from a perspective of giving, you never regret it.
Yeah.
Giving yourself and pursuing that. And so just because you don't feel it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And is sex that's the question. Is it for you taking, or are you giving, and are you making love? And as you become married, you learn how to do that and what that actually means. Of that beautiful, it's a physical, psychological, and then you integrate the spiritual experience of full, complete vulnerability. Like, you're lost together in a moment together that's you can't quite comprehend. And you can't go into that place if you're going into it to take. And when you go there, it somehow also bonds you, like you were talking about earlier, spiritually. And you feel that closeness again. So you have to be intentional on cultivating it.
What if you have, what if your spouse, or what if one of the spouses is not equally yoked in the amount of sex that they feel like is required in order for them to feel fulfilled in that area.
So whenever I work with couples, we go through a marriage assessment, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the questions we ask them separately. What's your sexual expectation? What's your sexpectation of how often you're going to make love? And so I get a range from anywhere between daily and every other week, usually.
Yeah.
That's the farthest range distance. And so what you'll have to do is have a dialogue to close that gap and figure out what's realistic and practical. And that might feel uncomfortable. Like, how often should we have sex? You have to have that conversation so that you can clarify your expectations. And then if your expectations aren't being met, then at that point, what do? You can become resentful and critical, or your other option is to trade your expectation for appreciation. That's the only other option you have. But you must negotiate what a healthy pattern might look like.
Thank you for investing in yourself with us. And if you feel like, hey, I found my tribe, right now go ahead and subscribe to the show. Or you can just find us on social media at Instagram at saints.crown. I hope to see you soon.